Welcome to 6G Agenda. I'm your host, Andrew, here again with my man Justin Ward on the chords.
Yo,
And we talk about what they want.
indeed.
We got a special surprise for you today. We got a nice, well, it may not be that much of a surprise if you saw the description on the episode, but we have our first specialist coming in, our first expert. We're going to be getting into that. So that's exciting. We're going to bring him on here in a second.
Fuck
Before we
yeah.
do, if you'd check out our description, go give us some love on socials, all the good stuff, like, follow, share, all that. And yeah, give us some support. Without further ado, let's get into it. Please welcome San Francisco Bay architect Richard Gage. He's an AIA member. It's the American Institute of Architects. He was a founder and former CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and now he leads the charge of a new World Trade Center investigation. And he's doing that with his courageous wife, Gail, and they're both at the Richard Gage's 911.org if you want to check that out. Welcome on, Richard. Very excited to talk to you here.
Oh, thanks so much, Andrew. I really appreciate that. And looking forward to sharing this incredible information, mind blowing stuff for a lot of people who are unaware of it.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, this is kind of a part two of a 9/11 special we did. I listened to your work, kind of researched some other aspects that you don't hit quite as hard on, and brought it all together. I do want to kind of get a little bit more of the expert kind of structural anomalies that went on that day, and yeah, so I'm super excited to kind of hear your expertise.
Right on. I'm honored to be here with you, and thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Well, let's get going. So, how did you? I get. We could talk about Seven or the Twin Towers first. I kind of wanted to
Seven.
ask what you thought about the evaluation of Building Seven, only because they're pushing for a new evaluation of the other buildings, and I feel like it might be the same finding.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I'll share with you all about Building Seven. It's the smoking gun, and we we've got a lot of information on it. In fact, throw up that screen, and we'll jump right into it,
Let's do it.
and then we'll talk about the Twin Towers. This building was up on the upper right here. Um, the third worst structural failure in modern history after the Twin Towers, right? So it's going to be easy to convince everybody here that these buildings were brought down by explosive controlled demolition. That's what we're going to do, but it's going to leave an awful feeling in your gut. And that awful feeling has to do with what does this mean? What are the implications of the controlled demolitions? Is our society what I thought it was? Is our government what I thought it was? Who's really running things? Why were we lied to on such a massive scale? These questions are what we're left with, and it is very uncomfortable.
Yeah, we deal with a lot of that here. I definitely want to get. Yeah, that's what we hammer on the most is what does it all mean? What's coming, and who's the control arms of what's kind of making it happen? But we want
Yeah,
to get some of that kind of that real um, kind of evidence from you, just to back up our kind of you know, our
right.
whatever you would call it, just kind of look, brainstorming.
Right on. Well, most people don't even know about the collapse of a 47-story building on the afternoon of 9/11 in New York, part of the World Trade Center complex. I'm one of 90,000 members of the American Institute of Architects. We didn't get one bulletin on this. Again, the third worst structural failure in modern history. This
You
building
didn't
is
get
small.
one.
No,
That's
this
crazy.
should have been the most studied structural failure ever. All the universities, after all, there are hundreds of similarly designed high rises throughout the world.
And to
Uh,
this day, I mean, they did have a reevaluation of who did the reevaluation. Was that architectural engineers with that the one where they said that they can't really answer for how it fell?
well, we're gonna get into the University of Alaska, who did the the uh, the dynamic analysis of this building, proving that NIST lied to us essentially.
Mhm.
They don't go into how it came down, but we do. and we're going to distinguish the difference between these
Awesome.
two entities. Uh, though the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth did fund that study, but this building is it would be the tallest building in most of our states. It's half the height of the Twin Towers, but they were the tallest buildings in the world at the time.
Mm.
Mammoth buildings, as you can see. Building 7 was about a football field north of the North Tower, and it came down in the afternoon, but earlier in that morning, the Twin Towers came down, caused a little bit of damage to the building, as you can see in the lower left here, uh, indicated by the red, and some damage in the lower corner. But this was not a significant factor in the building's collapse, according to NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain these collapses to the American people. Well, we'll find out what their story was about the cause of this collapse. But let's quickly look at the collapse first. In the upper left, we have the east penthouse that comes down initially in an isolated event. And then after 6 seconds, this happens. Just straight down, uniformly,
Oh yeah.
symmetrically into its own footprint. We're going to break that down. But first, here's NIST telling us what they think, or they want us to think,
And
brought it
and
down.
this is the building that they announced had fallen before it had fallen, correct, on the news? Where the
Yeah,
lady
we'll get to that
it
too.
was
Good
there.
point.
Awesome,
Yeah, the
awesome.
BBC announced the collapse of this building before it ever came down. So
Crazy. Yeah,
let's
yeah,
listen
go ahead
to
and play it.
Sham Sunder of the NIST report.
What we found was that uncontrolled building fires caused an extraordinary event. The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fire.
Fires. Okay, well, let's look at those fires, shall we? These are the worst fires that we have photo or video evidence of in the building. They're few, they're small, and they're scattered throughout the building. And they're burned out on the area of interest of NIST for the initiation of collapse theory that they came up with. And they try to convince us that those fires were burning ravagely on that floor at that time. But as you can see, the fires are burnt out. So
Mhm.
already, right off the bat, we can see that they're lying to us. It doesn't get too much more clear than this, but we've got a lot of evidence to show. Like, for instance, the fact that there has never been a steel frame fire protected structure ever in history that's come down due to fire. Not before 9/11, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And there's at least a dozen after 9/11. And we have so many examples. Not one of these fully engulfed buildings has come down. So what
To
could
this
have?
day, huh?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
No, steel frame fire protected structures are like incinerators. They're designed to burn everything in it, but not the structure itself. They're not designed to burn everything. They're designed to allow for everything to burn without coming down. What could it have been? Let's compare a known controlled demolition on the left with building 7 on the right. Is there any similarity? Enough to
Exactly the
warrant
same.
an investigation into the possible use of explosives, especially since that's the official, since the official narrative has never uh, happened before in history. It's an unprecedented event. It should have
Yeah,
been
and
the
I've seen
first time.
videos as well. I've seen videos of police officers that were saying, "It's gonna blow," and, trying to push people down the street,
Yeah, we'll get to
as
that
well that
too.
they delete.
You bet.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's an important one, foreknowledge. So we have to look at the features of controlled demolition to determine, does building 7 have any of these? Let's start with feature number 1. Is there a sudden onset of the building? Let's listen to Dan Rather.
Oh, one second.
Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Describe that. Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
What was that, Dan? Deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock down?
Yeah, I'm sure he had no idea.
He's never said this on mainstream television before. In fact, with few exceptions, we've never seen Building 7 come down, with two exceptions only. Um, and so it's like they want it to go away. It's just being swept under the rug. Let's look at feature number 2. Is there a straight down symmetrical collapse? From West Street, we can see, yeah, it's pretty straight down, pretty symmetrical. How do you do that? You have to take out all the core columns at once within a fraction of a second of each other, followed about a second later by the perimeter columns. Any deviation in that pattern and the building will begin to tip over. You have to repeat this on every floor, too, by the way. Are these fires going to have that level of precision? Not going to happen. Anything goes wrong, you get terrible things happening like this if all those explosives don't go off just right. Or this, where somebody has to go back into that building and fix those duds of explosions that didn't go off.
Wow.
Again, if a
Yeah.
building is damaged on one side, it's going to fall to that side. This is like common sense. A fifth grader knows this. So, NIST says it was damaged on the northeast corner, as we saw. It should have fallen to that side. And so we look and see how fast is this building coming down. Well, physicists have clocked it. It's coming down to free fall. That's as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky. The bowling ball could fall that fast because it has no structural resistance under it.
Right.
This building had 40,000 tons of structural resistance, 3 to 5 times stronger than it needed to be to support this building. NIST finally admits this, but they don't acknowledge the implications of that free fall. They don't acknowledge that what happened to those columns, 80 of them on every floor, all at once, and then synchronistically timed floor
So
by
per
floor.
floor, 80 per floor had to go at once.
80 and then synchronistically timed floor by
So
floor.
what would that suggest in your
We're going to get to
estimation?
that.
Okay. Okay.
That's the whole point we're making with this
I mean, that's insane.
evidence. And the real question, the first question to ask is,
Uh-huh.
can these fires do that? Because that's the official narrative. And the obvious answer is no.
That's logical is no.
Then we look at the pile and we say, do we have the total dismemberment, which is feature number 5 of the building? Well, look, it falls like a house of cards. A 47-story, moment resisting steel frame building falling like a house of cards, where the columns and beams have obviously been severed one from another, 4 to 6 stories tall. The buildings that like this are ductile. The connections are the strongest. They don't fail at their connections, moment resisting frames. They fail in the beam if they're going to fail at all. So, what can do this? Um, Not natural collapses. Natural collapses like this in earthquakes, buildings fall over to the path of least resistance. The columns and beams are not severed one from another. The concrete is not pulverized to a fine powder. We recognize the building as a building, not a pile like a house of cards. Can these fires accomplish that? No. So, what can? Well, let's look for clues. Witnesses of explosions. NIST says there are none, but there are at least a dozen. Here's a few of them. This is Daryl, a medical student interviewed on the New York radio that evening.
We were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out, and it was horrifying. And then about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
Wow. The sound of a clap of thunder, a shockwave ripping through the building, the windows busting out, and then the building coming down. How about Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic? What did he experience?
You heard explosions, like boom. It's like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion.
And Bill Rosati, what did he
I
see?
was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash, and then I seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere.
A big flash. Okay. And then the building coming down. How about New York Fire Department Captain Richard Patterson?
1-7 let go as well, and was a series of concussive explosions.
And Patrick Dillon, first responder.
I remember feeling that like it was like freight trains underneath the earth, shaking the earth, even shaking me. That's when we all saw Building 7 crumple in the middle, like way up at the top. It buckled and then dropped.
Yeah, fascinating. And Richard Rotan's director of the New York Office of Emergency Management. What did he experience inspecting the building at about noon?
Then he had to go into that building to assess it.
You could hear the building creak above us. You could hear things fall. You could hear the fire burning. You could see columns just hanging from the upper floors, gaping holes in the floors up above us. There was an elevator car that was blown out of its shaft and it was down the hall.
Wait a minute. An elevator car blown out of the shaft that was down the hall. The elevator car is here, and it was here, but it's been blown out of the hoistway way over here, 30 to 40 feet away, as he clarified later.
Wow.
What can do that? We're talking about massive explosions inside the buildings, explosions that were experienced by these gentlemen, Barry Jennings and Mayor Giuliani's attorney, Michael Hess, who were called to a meeting, but they were late and they didn't realize the whole building had been evacuated. They got up to the 23rd floor and they made a call and they're told to get out of that building. And they tried, and this is what happened to them on the way down.
When we got to the 8th floor, I started walking to one side of the building. That side of the building was gone. The first explosion I heard when I was on the stairwell landing, when we made it down to the 6th floor. Then we made it back to the 8th floor, I heard some more explosions. You know,
What's the sound?
like a boom, like an explosion.
More than one?
Yes. We started walking down the stairs, we made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. When we get outside, a police officer comes to me and says, you have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run.
You have to run. Bombs like this heard in the late morning of 9/11 in the vicinity of Building 7.
Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
We got some issues here. And speaking of foreknowledge, Andrew, we do have Chief Nick Viscani, for instance, saying, we're moving the command post over this way. That building's coming down. Well, wait a minute. How does he know it's going to come down? We've never lost a steel frame fire protected structure ever in history. We'll listen to Chief Hayden.
Well, we had our special operations people set up surveying instruments to monitor and see if there was any movement in the building. We're concerned of the possibility of collapse of the building. And we had a discussion with one particular engineer there, and we asked him if we allowed it to burn, could we anticipate a collapse, and if so, how soon? And it turned out that he was pretty much right on the money, that he said in its current state you have about 5 hours.
Wait a minute. In its current state, you have about 5 hours? How does this engineer know that a building that's on fire is going to come down at all?
That's a good engineer.
A really good engineer, or a lying one who knew when it was supposed to come down, because it did come down in almost exactly 5 hours. The prediction could only have been made with foreknowledge. Of course, they won't release the name of that engineer, but listen to these mysterious construction workers walking away from Building 7, hearing an explosion over their shoulder, looking back at the building, and then looking straight into the CNN camera and saying this.
You hear that?
Keep your eye on that building, it'll be coming down.
The building is about to blow up. Move it back.
All right, guys? Sorry.
We are walking back. There's a building about to blow up. On flame, debris coming down.
The building is about to blow up, flame and debris coming down. How do they know that the building's about to blow up? Well, that's fascinating. What did Kevin McPadden hear? Before he heard those explosions, He's listening to a radio held in the hands of a Red Cross worker about 6 blocks away because they were told the building's going to come down. So they're moving everybody back. And this is what he's hearing on that radio.
At the last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1.
Wait a minute. Do buildings come down by fires to countdowns? I have a problem with this. And the BBC that you mentioned, Andrew, that has announced the collapse of this building 20 minutes before it happened.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago, I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy.
Sketchy indeed. The building's still standing behind her. How did she know that a building that only had a few fires in it is going to collapse? Unprecedented. They apologize for this grievous error, citing the confusing events of the day. Does that make them psychic? What's really going on here? Well, we can get a clue from CNN. They announced the collapse that morning at 11:07.
In New York, Alan Dobbs-Frank joins us on the phone in Lower Manhattan. Alan?
Aaron, just 2 or 3 minutes ago, there was yet another collapse or explosion. I'm now out of sight. A Good Samaritan has taken me in on Duane Street. But at 11:15, there was another collapse or explosion following the 10:30 collapse of the second tower. And a firefighter who rushed by us estimated that 50 stories went down. The street filled with smoke. It was like a forest fire roaring down a canyon. Now, as I think Patty Sabga and others have told you,
Wait a minute. There's a problem here. A 50-story building went down? No other 50-story building went down. No other building totally collapsed. There were buildings that were damaged. But they're talking about Building 7 here, and they're talking about it about 7 hours early. So that's very interesting. 10:45. How'd that building come down at that time? We would not have any videos of it because it would have been completely obscured by the massive dust cloud released when the Twin Towers went down. So, yeah, we got to think about this a little more critically. Some people speculate that those mysterious construction workers who were walking out of Building 7 announcing that it's going to blow up, flame and debris coming down, that they were fixing a dud and that didn't go off at 10:45. And that
Yeah, definitely. I did hear that, and I do think that they almost had times they were supposed to announce a thing, and then things don't go as planned. They didn't get the memo. They still announced it. I mean, otherwise it's like what it doesn't make any sense. I mean,
No, it really doesn't. And that's what the experts say. This guy is a controlled demolition expert. Let's see what he says.
Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten. Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Dit heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Higher job done by a team of experts. Kamal Obeid is a little more conservative. A localized failure in a steel frame building like World Trade Center 7 cannot cause a catastrophic collapse like a house of cards without a simultaneous and patterned loss of several of its columns at key locations within the building. He is one of 36 structural engineers signed on to the petition demanding a new investigation. And so the University of Alaska got wind of this. Professor Leroy Hulsey, one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, performed a 4-year, $300,000 study of how this building would have responded to fire. Is NIST correct? Is if they are, there are again hundreds of buildings similarly designed. We should be really concerned about that. So they put two competing softwares together and they corroborated each other's results. One was SAP 2000, the other Abacus. They found that, gosh, if column 79 failed, according to the theory of NIST, it would have fallen over. That makes sense, right? It's in the northeast corner on the right side over here. And so you can compare the actual video of the collapse in the center with the University of Alaska on the left, and they are the same identically. And you can compare
Wow.
that with the US government NIST model on the right, where they stop the whole thing after 2 seconds into the global failure because it actually begins to tip over after crumpling up like a beer can. So even though they released 4,000 structural steel connections every 400 structural steel connections every second, they still couldn't get their building to fall at free fall straight down like the video says. And yet they tell us that it matches remarkably well with the video of the collapse. No, it doesn't. So what are the findings of Professor Leroy Halsey? Fire didn't cause the collapse of this building. Temperatures were not high enough to cause a weakening of the steel framing. Thermal expansion did not result in a loss of support for the beams and the girders. The collapse of this building was a global failure involving what? The near simultaneous failure of all the columns in the building, not a progressive collapse as claimed by NIST. So they completely pulled the rug out from underneath the NIST report, leaving us to wonder, well, what did bring this building down? We saw some witnesses of explosions, but we also have evidence of extreme heat given to us by who? FEMA in the Building Performance Assessment Team report that came out in May of 2002. What do they say in their metallurgical examination of the steel? Never before observed eutectic reactions and intergranular melting. It's capable of turning a solid steel girder into Swiss cheese, like we see in this piece of the end of the beam at Building 7 and the Twin Towers. All this evidence of extreme heat applies to the Twin Towers as well. Rapid oxidation, sulfidation, liquid iron, that's molten iron. By the way, that's 3,000 degrees to melt iron, 3,000 Fahrenheit. So fires don't get to be those temperatures, as you'll see. Sulfur formed during this hot corrosion attack on the steel. Perhaps the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation, says the New York Times, but NIST completely omitted this vital information from their report, as they did the witnesses of explosions. They even speculated the sulfur might have come from gypsum board. Well, gypsum board has been used for 100 years to protect steel from fire. It's never turned around and attacked the steel that it's designed to protect. So, no. The author of the FEMA report, Jonathan Barnett, fire protection engineer, says steel members in the debris pile appear to have been partly evaporated in extraordinarily high temperatures. But it takes 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit to evaporate steel. Where are we getting these temperatures? Office fires typically don't get a quarter of these temperatures. And yet the evaporation of steel is documented by Abulhazan Astani Ozil, structural engineer with a Science Foundation grant to study the steel. He saw the melting of girders. And we can tell by the molten material dripping out of the crab claw excavator what its temperature is. We're exceeding 2,500 degrees just right here.
And there's no way that kerosene could cause it to get this. I mean, we're talking about building 7 right now. So just to clarify, like this is
Yeah, there's
done
no
just
plane
on
that
that.
hit Building 7. I didn't even mention that, Andrew. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
No plane, but in the Twin Towers, there was, of course, planes. And we have jet fuel, which is, like you said, essentially kerosene. It burns only 600 degrees, according to this engineer. Some say much hotter. There's a lot of corroboration for these temperatures, but it will never burn hotter than hydrocarbons, which is what it is. So office fires, they're extreme hottest, mathematical, experimental, conservative data for the worst case scenarios is 1830 degrees. We're twice these
It's
temperatures.
yeah.
So what can do that? Well, thermite can do that. But what is thermite anyway?
Oh, that is my fault.
Reaction, creating molten iron. In just 2 seconds, thermite can reach temperatures over 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, quite enough to liquefy steel. We know that open-air fires cannot burn hot enough to melt steel, but metal had melted at the base of the towers. Appendix C of the field report describes sulfur residues on the World Trade Center steel. The New York Times called this the deepest mystery of all. Sulfur slightly lowers the melting point of iron, and iron oxide and iron sulfide had formed on the surface of the structural steel. Sulfur used with thermite is called thermate, producing even faster results.
Fascinating, because maybe we're getting somewhere here now. If thermite were used, it would explain the extreme heat, 4,000 to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It would explain the presence of sulfur. Sulfur is added to thermite to become thermate, much more effective at cutting through steel. Would also explain the presence of other forms of ignited incendiaries in the World Trade Center dust, previously molten iron microspheres found by who? The U.S. Geological Survey in their particle atlas came out in 2005. They studied all the dust. They find billions of what? Previously molten, that's 3,000 degrees. Iron, the byproduct of thermite. Microspheres, how do they get spherical? Well, that's what aerosolized liquids do due to surface tension. And so this is fascinating. The EPA even calls it the signature component of the World Trade Center dust. In other words, it's not even World Trade Center dust unless it has all these previously molten iron microspheres in it. They're up to 6% of many of these samples. By extrapolation, about 4 tons of this material throughout all the World Trade Center dust. Wow. Where's it coming from? RJ Lee says it's formed during the event, not before, by the iron workers welding the building together, not afterward by the iron workers cutting the building apart, but during the event. This is an independent study of the dust by the RJ Lee group. Well, where are they coming from? We could do an experiment and find out. Experiment is the arbiter of competing hypotheses. Let's do one. Let's light some thermite. What we see are what look like thousands of sparks, but they cool, they fall into the pan as previously molten iron microspheres. Wow. This is fascinating evidence of ignited thermite. All of this has been so far. Now we ask ourselves, is there any evidence of unignited thermite in the World Trade Center dust? Yeah. A team of 8 international scientists led by this gentleman, Niels Harrod and Stephen Jones, they analyze the dust throughout the World Trade Center that are independently collected samples that are sent to them by people. And they find in all of them these red-gray chips, red on one side, gray on the other. I thought they were paint. But unlike paint, they are attracted by a magnet. They have a high ferromagnetic attraction. This is interesting because paint doesn't do this. And the even iron oxide paint, which is what's used to protect steel from rust, from rusting out. And so they get real curious. They analyze the red layer and they find high levels of aluminum and iron and manganese, which is added to thermite to become thermate. What is the signature of thermite doing in, or thermate doing in all the World Trade Center dust samples? That is curious. And they zoom in 50,000 times with an electron microscope. What do they find? Iron oxide crystals that are 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair at the nanoscale. They also find aluminum platelets. Iron oxide and aluminum are the key ingredients of thermite. What are we talking about here? What's going on? These are set in an organic matrix of organic material, oxygen, silica, and carbon. That's what's used in TNT, high energy explosives, to expand rapidly like a gas and knock things over. That's how explosives work. Whereas incendiaries typically work by extreme temperatures, they burn things up 4 to 5,000 degrees. Well, they don't know what this stuff is. They did peer-reviewed literature. They found out this is called super thermite. It's already been published before 2001 by Lawrence Livermore Lab. Explosive composites based on thermite reactions whose fuel and oxidizer constituents are intimately mixed at the nanometer size scale. See, when you get this stuff so small at the nanoscale, the chemical reaction is virtually instantaneous. You've engineered an incendiary to become more explosive. And like the red chips at Lawrence Livermore Lab, which ignited at about 850 degrees Fahrenheit, these chips did the same thing and produced an exothermic reaction, proving that it's not paint. So paint doesn't have these exotic properties. So they found nanothermite in all of the samples that they studied.
So they found unignited thermite that they then took and lit or used, made it work, essentially
Yes.
lit it.
In a
And
heater.
it was that. And there's
And
nothing you would find inside of any building that maybe has this composition in it for any reason. You said no to paint. There's nothing else.
well, these elemental components, iron oxide is essentially rust. That's in buildings. Aluminum is in the buildings. But at the nanoscale, intimately mixed, 3/4 to 1/4, formed into red-gray chips that are obviously
Right.
fluid applied. No,
Exactly.
nothing. Not paint, no nothing that would do this. Um, and for fear of burning up, if there was a fire, it would light all that stuff up like these did at 800 degrees Fahrenheit. So what do you suppose happened when those chips ignited in the heater, the differential scanning calorimeter? They produce molten iron microspheres with the same chemical signature as the molten iron microspheres found and produced and analyzed by the USGS and RJ Lee in all their samples. So we know exactly where those previously molten iron microspheres came from. They came from these red-gray chips. As if we didn't know, they're found attached to partially ignited red-gray chips, as you see here and here. This is a very sophisticated material found not in a cave in Afghanistan,
Right.
but in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories. So we know where to go for a real investigation, right? And this is a 24-page peer-reviewed paper in the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. The red layer that we found is unreacted thermitic material incorporating nanotechnology. It's a highly energetic pyrotechnic or explosive material. So, yeah.
Nanotechnology.
Yeah. And we've given this peer-reviewed report to every member of Congress at least 2 times over the last 20 years. Can't get any response. Got some response from Connecticut Congressman Jim Hines. He wrote NIST, and they wrote him back and said, "Oh, yeah, there's aluminum in the building and iron in the building, and don't worry about this." It was absolutely ridiculous. So we've got some plans. I'll tell you about how to get a real investigation here. But for Building 7, We have 10 key characteristic features and some very uncharacteristic features here, which is direct evidence of destruction with explosives and particularly incendiaries here. And fire doesn't create any one of these features, let alone all 10 of them. With additional circumstantial evidence and corroborative testimony, that becomes proof of controlled demolition, a body of proof that's convinced 3,600 architects and engineers to sign the petition demanding a new investigation. And many of them appear in our film series, 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom, which we're working on feverishly, and we've released 4 episodes already. Here's an introduction to them.
No matter how improbable the conclusion may appear, when you've eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
We're bringing alive in the film the 60 exhibits of the 9/11 WTC evidence contained in the Lawyers Committee grand jury petition that have already been submitted to the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan to present to a special criminal jury.
This historic investigation is ongoing, and there's a role for you in it. Yes, you can help us bring the real perpetrators to justice.
Through this film series, we're bringing together 24 experts in their fields.
They ignored any scenario involving incendiaries.
Demolition work, you're going to set charges on each floor.
The building could not have been brought down by office fires.
In other words, all of the interior columns over 8 stories came down, were basically lost at once.
I could make out what looked like from a science fiction movie, molten lava, okay?
And he paused and said, that'll be coming down around 5 o'clock.
We'll be filming these evidence presentations not only for our filings with the grand jury, also as presentations to each of you.
We're inviting you to serve as virtual grand jurors during each episode.
$3,000 people, huh? That is a lot of people to be coming together. I mean, just to start, and they're all, did you say firefighters, experts, all together, right?
Yeah, high-rise
Architectural.
architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolition experts,
Oh, great.
all of them.
So does this have anything to do with, because I mean, Trump kind of hinted at it a little bit in his previous presidency, and then he kind of hasn't said a word since he mentioned the bombs in the buildings. But then now you see kind of this resurgence of kind of a lot of files and redoing, investigations in general.
Yeah.
Not to give him necessarily credit for it, but there is this push for it from somewhere, it seems. So do you think that maybe that's kind of helping your case a little bit? Maybe there's some.
Oh, yeah.
With
We
yeah.
have top podcasters, Clayton Morris and Jimmy Dore and Tucker Carlson
Oh, yeah.
talking about 9/11. Tucker just released 5 episodes of 9/11 files, he calls it.
Yep.
And this evidence, some of it appears in there. The Halsey report appeared in there. The active thermitic materials report appeared in there. So, yeah, he's shifting the Overton window. And
Yes.
you mentioned Trump and saying that there must have been bombs. Well, look at what we're looking at. Upward, outward,
Yeah.
arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying structural steel sections weighing 4 and 8 tons, laterally ejected at 80 miles an hour, clocked by physicists.
There's a
Landing
lot of space between that debris and those buildings, and this is way after the plane hit, so it's
Well, they're
not.
landing up to 600 feet in every direction.
Mhm.
So what can
Wow.
do that? And what's trailing them? Thick white smoke clouds. Where do those thick white smoke clouds come from? Steel is not flammable in office fire conditions. Well, let's see what happens with thermite. We see the molten metal, but we also see thick white smoke clouds of aluminum oxide ash, the other byproduct of thermite. So now it's starting to piece together, but let's step through it just step by step here. Beginning with feature number 1, is there a sudden onset of destruction? Well, yeah, the North Tower standing at rest, and all of a sudden it's in uniform downward motion. No jolt, no hesitation upon impact with the cold, hard steel below. Same with the South Tower. It's at rest, and all of a sudden, uniform downward motion, no stoppage when it meets the incredible resistance below. We're told that the upper part drove the rest of the building down to the ground and then destroyed itself. And is that what we see? This is called the crush down, crush up theory, produced by Zdenek Bazant of Northwestern University in Chicago. He produced this paper, which is a piece of mathematical wizardry, which confused structural engineers until they decoded it 10 years later. He produced this in 2 days and he submitted it for peer review
Wow.
within 2 days after now. The rest of us are freaked out, right? We're wondering when's the next plane coming? Who's attacking us here? We didn't know the answers to these questions, and so this this guy did, but his theory, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, but he suffers from Newton's third law of motion. There's an equal and opposite destructive force when two bodies collide. Run a Mack truck into a Volkswagen. Who wins? The Mack truck, right? Does it matter if we drop the Volkswagen onto the Mack truck? No, the upper part is the lightest part. Look at the steel in the upper part. And it's only 3/4 inch thick at the top, but then it starts to get heavier and heavier down below till you're 52 inches by 22 inches in the core columns and the 2-inch thick steel. But that steel, it infills and becomes almost solid steel at the bottom. So let's look and examine if the upper part, the Volkswagen, is destroying the lower part, the Mack truck. I'll make it easier. Look at the lower red line. Is Is the upper part destroying the lower part? No, it's destroying itself. It's being destroyed. It's telescoping in on itself. What's happening to it? Well, we're we can see that it's blowing up, but we're going to see a lot more evidence of it. If it were there destroying the lower part, we would see it. There's none of the photos or videos after 2 or 3 seconds shows any upper section. It's been destroyed. If it were there, it would have destroyed these few remaining core columns standing 900 feet in the air for a dozen seconds after the towers came down. So no, uh, it's not the
Wow,
upper part failed.
I never saw those core columns like that. That's
Yeah.
great. They
Isn't that
look like they're
amazing?
melting into they almost look melted a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
crazy.
yes, they have been taken apart and stripped with explosives and incendiaries as we've been seeing, and we will see more of. Listen, what's really going on here? It looks more like the volcanic eruption in the Tongan Sea. Which one's the volcanic eruption, by the way? Which one's World Trade Center 1?
Hard to
Uh,
tell. I think the
it
left.
is hard to tell. Yeah. And good guess. But what we have is again upward, outward, arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying structure, solid molten objects, trailed by thick white smoke clouds. That's the analogy that we're looking at, up to 600 feet again in every direction. Wait a minute. So this is a lie, this crush down, crush up theory. What we're really seeing is this outward explosive event out and away from those few remaining core columns, which then eventually go down by themselves. And so we have to look and see what could be bringing this, tearing this building apart. Is there evidence of explosions? Is there witnesses? NIST says no. Once again, no witnesses of explosions in the Twin Towers either, save those explosions when the planes hit and some explosions in the lobby. Well, here's 156 first responders who are witnesses of explosions recorded orally within a month after 9/11. 12,000 pages of testimony finally available on the New York Times website because they sued the city of New York to get them released. And we didn't have access to these until August of 2005. And Graham McQueen read all 12,000 pages. He found 156 witnesses like this. We felt the ground shake. You could see the tower sway, and then it just came down. All of a sudden, the ground just started shaking. Felt like a train running under my feet. The next thing we know, we look up and the tower's collapsing. Again and again, you're going to hear this specific order of events. They're hearing something, they're seeing something, they're feeling something before the towers come down. Shook my bones shortly before the first tower came down. I remember feeling the ground shaking, heard a terrible noise, and then debris just started flying everywhere. I saw flash, flash, flash at the lower level of the building, like when they demolish a building, with each popping sound initially an orange, and then a red flash came out of the building, and then it would just go all around the building on both sides. I saw a number of brief light sources being emitted from inside the building between floors 10 and 15. We saw about 6 of these brief flashes, accompanied by a crackling sound before the tower collapsed. I saw low level flashes. I saw flash, 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 and then it looked like the building came down. An explosion appeared at the very top simultaneously from all 4 sides. Material shot out horizontally, and then there seemed to be a momentary delay before you could see the beginning of the collapse. How specific does this fire chief, this expert witness, need to be? There was an explosion in the South Tower. When it hit about the 5th floor, I figured it was a bomb because it looked like a synchronized, deliberate kind of thing. Seemed like on television when they blow up these buildings, seemed like it was going all the way around like a belt. All these explosions. The building is blowing out on all 4 sides. We actually heard the pops, You heard the pops of the building. I thought the terrorists planted explosives somewhere in the building. That's how loud it was, a crackling explosive. Another loud boom at the upper floors, and their series of smaller explosions which appeared to go completely around the building at the upper floors. Another loud earth-shattering blast with a large fireball that blew out more debris.
And by
Low
the way,
level.
like the crackling and the fireball, that's like incendiary evidence, isn't it? I mean, when you think of like thermite, it like kind of cracks and like, almost like a
No, explosives
firework.
crack. Thermite gives a big fizzle.
I see.
That
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess I was imagining that in my head when I said crack, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, that kind of like when you light a stick of a like for a little piece of dynamite or firework, that sound that the actual wick has, if you were to make that
Yeah,
a
that's what
massive
thermite
amount.
sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was imagining. That kind of
Yeah, then when the
that wick.
dynamite goes off, that's an explosion.
That's
That's
the
a crack.
actual crack. Yeah, the
Yeah.
explosion.
And this guy says at the lower level of the building, like when they demolish a building, that's what I thought I saw. "Did you see any flashes?" I said, "Yes." "Well, I thought it was just me." He said, "No, I saw them too." Everybody, I think, still at that point still thought these things were blown up. So I was fully expecting anything else to blow up. "You were there when the planes hit?" "No, I was there when the building exploded." "You mean when it fell down?" "No, when it exploded." He's very clear what he saw. How about these guys?
Oh, 1 second.
It was if they had detonated. Detonated. Planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom. All the way down.
Interesting. Well, how about feature number 3? Is there a straight down symmetrical progression? Well, the south tower actually begins to lean over. So there's asymmetrical damage from this part that's leaning over 20 degrees. There's asymmetrical damage from the fires. There's asymmetrical damage from the broken columns from the planes. How in the world then do we get complete symmetrical destruction, just like the firefighters said, all the way around the building, all 4 sides and down to the ground? How does that happen? It makes no sense. One doesn't follow from the other. Let's see what's going on with a close up. Do we have in this looped video visual evidence of about a dozen independent explosions? I think so. And those explosions are can only be pre-placed explosives in the outer wall, floor by floor. You can see them quite easily. What's going on here? This is not a nuclear weapon going off, by the way. These are independent, small, rapidly placed, synchronistically timed explosions. And that is not directed energy weapons weakening the steel somehow so this building can fall. This
Yeah,
is
you can see it's very uniform as well, and it's insane to think that somebody had to go floor to floor, corner to corner, and put this. I would imagine it's almost like a paint of some sort that they kind of rub it somewhere so it could ignite later, which
yeah.
is that's a huge feat just in itself.
Well, yeah, these look more like explosives than incendiaries. So we think both were used.
Oh, both. Okay.
Yeah, and that's responsible for what we're about to see. Isolated explosive ejections occurring how far down below the zone of destruction? 20 stories down, even 40 stories down below the zone of destruction. We have these isolated explosives called squibs in the controlled demolition industry, even 60 stories down below. There's no explanation for these whatsoever either in the official narrative. It makes no sense. And we see a dozen of them on the left side of the South Tower minutes, well, as it's coming down, uh, uniformly, a dozen of them. Um, Isolated explosive ejections, even destroying the internal rigidity of the upper section above the point of plane impacts here so that it doesn't develop as a rigid structure, roll off the part below and the massive building below and maintain its angular momentum and fall onto the ground as a rigid body. No, it actually settles back down into itself as a group of isolated structural elements, more like sand falling. But the how fast is it coming down? Well, it's been clocked by physicists also, and it's almost free fall acceleration. It's not slowing down. Even 90% of the resistance of the columns has given way in order for it to fall at 64%, two-thirds of free fall.
And
Through what?
it's funny because there's no buildings that have fallen from fire to use as a reference to say, is anything else fallen at this speed except for demolition? It seems that demolition's the only explanation that we can kind of use as a reference point.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And this is what is falling through. The solid steel almost at the bottom, 52 inches wide by 22 inches high. And up above, they get smaller, of course, about half that at half height. And we're talking 47 massive core columns, 240 perimeter columns that look like this. There's more steel than glass outside of these mammoth buildings. They had to use a Varandale truss to keep it from tipping over in high winds and hurricanes, which they can have in New York. So, what happened to these exterior structural steel sections? Well, let's look at them with the evidence of the lateral ejection because they're landing, impaling themselves in skyscrapers all around the building. They've destroyed the Winter Garden 600 feet away of the World Financial
Wow.
Center. They've destroyed the Deutsche Bank building. These sections are held together at the top and bottom by 4 bolts. So all the plane had to do is punch in these sections, and that would shear off the 5/8 inch round bolts at the top and the bottom, 4 per column, and the bolts on the horizontal spandrel panel, which this gentleman is working on. But what happens to them? They are ejected, uh, f- uh, freely flying structural steel sections weighing 4 and 8 tons ejected laterally. Look at this one. It's about to hit building 7.
Hmm.
Back 2, forward 2. What do we notice here? It's gone out. How does gravity work, Andrew?
Hmm.
Down.
Good down.
Something else is happening here. It's gone straight out. Incredible explosive force. But what's it trailing? Thick white smoke clouds. We found out what that was aluminum oxide ash. That's the only thing it can be. Steel is not flammable in
A lot
office
of it.
fire conditions. Huh?
It's a lot of it too.
Yeah. There's hundreds of these. In fact, there's enough energy to hurl a 200-pound cannonball 3 miles for each one of them, and they are hurled. There are hundreds of them, 1,200-foot diameter, even greater, outside the footprint of these buildings, outside the boundary of World Trade Center, in fact. And by the way, if 100,000 tons of steel framing is distributed outside, well outside the footprint of each tower, what's crushing the building? This is
Exactly.
2/3 of the mass of that building. What's crushing the building? It's not the steel. This is 90 to 100,000 tons of steel that's not available to crush the building. Maybe it's a concrete. Let's look at feature number 8. What happens to the concrete? Oh, it's missing. Down at the bottom, we're expecting 110 floors, each an acre in size, 4-inch thick and 8-inch thick concrete poured on metal decking, supported by lightweight steel trusses. And we don't find 50 of them. We don't find 20, 10, not even 1 acre size floor, not a half acre, a quarter acre, or a 1/16 of an acre.
All of it's
Where?
gone.
It's all gone. Where did it go? We're going to find out. But compare that to this building in Bangkok, which was only 1/3 of the height of the Twin Towers, but has a
Insane.
pile that's 7 times, well, 3 times the height. Look at the guys down in the lower corner. We're talking 8, 9, 10 stories of pancakes here. That is a pancaking collapse. That is a natural collapse. Something very different happened at the World Trade Center. So where is the concrete? Oh, there it is, pulverized in midair. All of the photos, all of the videos show 90,000 tons of concrete pulverized in midair. Wow. So what can do that? Well, here's one thing that can do. Explosives can do that. That's one possibility.
Mm.
Here's another possibility. Did you know concrete is powderized at temperatures above 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit?
That's crazy.
What do we have with thermite, nanothermite? 4 and 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. White powder decomposed hydration products at 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Wow. Well, the Fire Safety Journal says 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit, completely decomposed. We have twice these temperatures available. So could it be the thermite was placed on the bottom of these floor slabs, which would evaporate not only the metal decking, the trusses that were supporting them, but perhaps the concrete too.
Wow. Man,
That's what,
that is outrageous.
I think so too. And where's that concrete going? It's being distributed laterally throughout lower Manhattan in a 3 square mile area. Than a blanket 3 inches thick. Well, wait a minute. If the concrete, which was another third of the weight of this building, is distributed from river to river across lower Manhattan, what's crushing the building? It wasn't the steel. The steel was 1/3 of the weight of the building. Together, this is 2/3 the weight of the building is not even available to crush that building. And yet, NIST's theory, provided by Zdenek Bazant in this mathematical wizardry of a paper submitted 2 days after 9/11, used all of the weight of that steel and concrete to crush it. Not only that, he fraudulently doubled it. And below, he decreased the column strength by a factor of 3.
Wow.
Complete fraud.
Make his numbers work.
Yep. And that is what NIST uses today as their key theoretical basis for this building's failure. And it's all fraud. It's rigged in favor of a collapse. And it's been refuted by engineers 10 years later. Richard Johns, Gregory Zudolinski, Tony Zambodi submitted papers to the American Society of Civil Engineer, but they won't publish them, even though they're in the same Journal of Engineering Mechanics that Zdenek Bazant published. Why won't they publish these challenges to these peer-reviewed papers? They're out of scope. Wait a minute. How is it out of scope to publish a challenge to a previously published paper in that journal? That's what we
Oh,
do
so
in
you
science.
can't
Huh?
even challenge it, huh? That's pretty insane.
Won't allow it. So there's ethical violation suits that have been filed, and that remains in play. Well, how would they have gotten such materials into the towers? Well, here's one possibility. There was a fireproofing upgrade in the months and years before 9/11. Coincidentally, some of those floors were coincident with the airplane impacts. That is a fascinating coincidence, and this needs more study. But could it be possible that they were applying liquid applied nanothermite under the guise of a fireproofing upgrade? Because there are liquid applied fireproofings called intumescent paint.
No.
So maybe that's what they were applying, and this is when they applied it. After all, the buildings were only half occupied. And we'll provide more information
Half
about.
occupied.
Yeah. They were money losers when
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Silverstein bought it just 6 weeks prior to 9/11.
And put
And
that
then
terrorist insurance on it.
much more terrorist insurance than they ever had. And the city was requiring New York Port Authority to abate the asbestos. That was a $5 billion job, asbestos abatement. And so why would you buy a building that's half occupied and needed asbestos? With $15 million of his own money, Silverstein acquired these for a total of $3.2 billion.
And he owned Building 7, correct?
He had developed Building 7 in 86, and he acquired these buildings just 6 weeks, these other 6 buildings, just 6 weeks after.
Okay.
Before 9/11. So
Not suspect at all.
no.
That's awesome. That is crazy. What's your
And-
take on Ace Elevator being such a small company compared to the company that put the elevators into the buildings in the
Let's
first
talk
place?
about Ace Elevator, because if you had access to those elevators, you'd have access to the core columns and beams in the building also. So yes, Ace Elevator had this contract. And in order to do anything with the beams, they would have had to cut through this 4-inch, 2-inch thick gypsum board on every floor, on most of the hoistways. So that would have created a lot of dust. But listen to the testimony of Scott Forbes, Senior Database Administrator at Fiduciary Trust.
It was probably the week leading up to 9/11. Every morning I'd come in around 7 a.m. and the dust was incredible. It was filthy. It was like the cleaners weren't cleaning. Right where the windows were, there was a sill which enclosed radiators. I was sick to death of the dust which was appearing on the windowsills. It was dirty grey and very, very noticeable in that week leading up to 9/11.
Wow. So that ties 2 and 2 together. Yeah, Ace Elevator had the largest elevator modernization in history, and they came from nowhere to get this contract from Otis Elevator, who had installed and had been maintaining the elevators up to this contract.
And Otis to this day is a major elevation company, and Ace Elevator is very, very small.
Oh, they went out of business. This was their only
Oh, yeah.
client.
Yeah.
So were there these 50 operators that were pulled out, by the way, the morning of 9/11? Well, they didn't come to work on 9/11. 50 of them to a union meeting to discuss business. Well, the coincidences just start piling up here.
Yeah.
So they did just fine. They just weren't there. Well, how about the steel? There was 180,000 tons of it. What happened to it? And easily the largest and most perplexing structural failures in history Up to 400 truckloads a day were brought in, and within 2 weeks after 9/11, the steel was carted away to the landfill and then shipped to China for recycling before investigators could get their hands on it and do a proper forensic examination. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene, prompting Bill Manning, editor in chief of Fire Engineering magazine, to cry out, "Crucial evidence could answer many questions is on the slow boat to China," showing an astounding ignorance of government officials to the value of a thorough scientific investigation. The destruction and removal of evidence must stop immediately, but it didn't. And so, together with the additional molten steel and iron evidence, the thermite incendiaries that we talked about, we have all 10 key characteristic features of controlled demolition. And that has convinced 3,600 architects and engineers to sign on to the petition demanding a new investigation based on this proof of controlled demolition. And again, they appear in the film series 9/11 Crime Scene to Court, and you can watch them. The first 4 episodes are out. They're incredible. I highly recommend it. Go to 911c2c.org. That's 911 letter C number 2 letter C.org. And you mentioned earlier, what are the opportunities? We're getting some movement out there in the 9/11 truth movement. And yes, former Congressman Dennis Kucinich and Kurt Weldon and Senator Ron Johnson are making a circuit about 9/11. Just yesterday, we had Brett Weinstein of Dark Horse interview Senator Ron Johnson. They spent the whole time talking about 9/11. They mentioned our work about 3 or 4 times. So this is happening, man. Senator Johnson gave the keynote address at this 3-day conference in Washington, D.C., and we were honored to have him there. We met with him in his office that morning, several of us, and discussed the having Senate hearings. And he encouraged us to work with his staff, come up with, compile our evidence all together in one cohesive whole, which is a big project, and we're going to be doing that over the next few months. And we expect to have Senate hearings in the Senate, like he did sponsor the COVID hearings. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
And
good luck with that. I really hope that turns out. I'd love to, in our lifetime, and not towards the end. You know what I mean? Like real shortly. Kind of get the answers to
Yeah.
what happened 25 years ago, 24 years ago.
I agree. And even 10 years ago, we had 9/11 explosive evidence experts speak out with 40 high rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolition experts all laying out this evidence. We have the 15-minute documentary just on Building 7, Solving the Mystery, and with actor Ed Asner narrating. And we have the story made by filmmaker Dylan Avery of the Halsey Report in this 1-hour documentary about the University of Alaska study. So all that's available to you at richardgage911.org, as is the brochure that outlines all this evidence for you. You can print it. You can download it for free from our website at the store and print it and give it to every architect and engineer you can find, everybody else that you know. After all, we've got to get to the truth about 9/11 and make the public aware of it, because it's been censored, as you can imagine, by the mainstream media. We got to draw our line in the sand somewhere. I drew it in 2006. I hope everybody else will draw your line and get this podcast, 6G, out to everybody. And the other work of Andrew and Justin. It's really important. Don't stick your head in the sand. It's time to speak the truth about 9/11. And that's why we're here. And we hope you'll join us. Right, Andrew?
Oh, of course. I'm with you. I'm with you, Richard. That was a beautiful deep dive, very informative. RichardGage911.org. Definitely go check out the rest of his work. He's out here fighting the good fight. I really hope that you get a massive amount of more people so you guys can, kind of do the same thing. What did Trump say? Too big to rig. You know what I mean? You gotta get enough people that are they can't mess with you. You know what I mean? They just have to just up the evidence.
That's right.
But I
You
really
keep
I really
moving.
hope for the best for that. Definitely. I hope to keep me posted on that. I'll have to bring you back on, afterwards and see how it went and go over, anything, the new findings of anything that may have came out later.
Oh, right on. Exactly. We'll do it. We're not going to stop. And thank you for getting the word out there.
Of course. No, my pleasure, Richard. Yeah, thank you for coming on, and I look forward to speaking with you anytime.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it was a beautiful deep dive. I really enjoyed it.
All right. I'm glad. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, man.
Of course. Yeah. Come back, see us again soon, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That was another episode of 6G Agenda. I hope you all enjoyed that. That was man, he got down
That was
to the details.
super informative. That was dope.
Definitely. I didn't even want to step in. I was like, do your thing. You
I
know what
know,
I mean?
man. Like
Killed
he
it.
was
Killed it. Do your thing, right? Don't let me stop the work.
he was
He's got
fucking
it down to
on
a
it.
science. Right? He's got the line in the sand slide. Like he's ready to go.
That
He's
had
like,
me I was like,
yeah,
hell
like y'all
yeah.
got to get the line and put it in the sand. Like, come on, when's your line? Hey, and I'm saying that about everything. Like when are y'all gonna wake up? Bill Cooper, wake up, sheeple. Not that people listen to this podcast, of course. Everybody on here knows what the fuck goes on. This was a good one, man. I hope you guys enjoyed. Yeah, whenever I first heard his stuff, it was it blew my mind. I definitely was convinced after the first time I heard his presentation that is 100% what happened.
Yeah.
Justin, what's your take?
I mean, I didn't disagree with anything that he said. There was shit that he was saying that I had never heard of, and like the side by sides that he was showing. He had every visual aid that he needed. He dotted every I, he crossed every T. He was fucking on it.
What'd I say? I said we brought our first expert, dude.
He
That's an
was an
expert at work
expert,
right
cuz.
there, bro.
Yeah,
That's
he
an expert
was.
at work right there. A1 as fuck. Definitely, hopefully we'll get it back on, after we see what happens with the new 9/11 Commission report. I would love to see the new findings on that. I would imagine it might be a little bit out of his spectrum as far as the speculating on the players involved, because that'll probably be more of the information we kind of get. But hey, that's our wheelhouse. We're gonna get all
Yeah.
deep into that. It's gonna be a good time. Yeah, no, definitely. It was awesome. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. We thought about putting it on Patreon. Throughout the course of listening to this, I decided we're gonna leave it, man. We're gonna leave it.
Yeah, this was a good
I'm
one,
gonna leave
dude.
it on the free feed, man. I'm leaving on the free feed. Just go give us some love. Go support the show. And if you value us, go support it. I'd hate to have the right person notice us before we're able to buy the security we need and whatnot. You know what I mean? I'd hate to have the wrong person approach my house before
Hey,
I
there's that
get all the
guy.
things I need. So yeah, donate to the security of 6G. 'Cause we're out here trying to do it. I'm just kidding, but yeah, I just heard that story about Nick Fuentes having somebody like try to come kill him. And I just thought, obviously, nowhere. I'm not worried about that because we aren't that political. I
Nah,
feel like
nah.
if you're really political, then that happens. We're not political. We're just like talking about what's going on.
We're just
So I gotta
talking
worry
shit,
about.
dude.
Yeah, we gotta worry more about the feds than fucking some crazy liberal.
Yeah, we gotta
You know
worry
what I
about
mean?
the feds if we're too right about some shit.
That's a fact. Or if we're the first to talk about it, I feel like. But
Yeah,
hey,
yeah.
sometimes that happens. But
Spread the
yeah, great
word.
episode. Great episode. We will man, the next one's gonna be another banger. We got a little whistleblower episode coming out. You guys
Hell
stay
yeah.
tuned. I think you will love it. So all right. Probably drop a bonus episode in this next 2 weeks for you guys. Enjoy it. All right, we'll see you next time. Peace.